Hello, I'm Scott Brady with Overland Journal, Expedition Portal, now all part of the Overland Collective. And I'm out here with our 2024 project vehicle. This is an Ineos Quartermaster that we have fitted the Scout Yoho Popup. Let's take a walk around and talk about what we've done with this project. So let's start by talking from the front of the vehicle back. I choose to keep my vehicles as close to stock as I can, and that's one of the things that I like about the Quartermaster is that this vehicle comes from the factory with a lot of the components that we would normally have to modify or we'd have to spend money on after the purchase. So this has a steel, all steel high clearance front bumper. It has an integrated winch. It's red winch out of the UK. They also were really thoughtful around the winch. So the winch only has about 50 feet of rope on it. And the reason why that's actually a good thing is it's much easier to get down to that first layer of the drum. And it also makes the winch a little bit more compact so it can fit tight and flush inside of that bumper. So this is how we're going to free spool the winch right here on the front. I did go with a Max Trax soft shackle to attach it to the front recovery point. Also from the factory, this vehicle has a heavy-duty front skid plate that helps to protect some of the steering components. Moving a little bit further back, these front springs are stock. So I've got a 34-inch diameter BF Goodrich all-terrain tire on here on a stock height suspension. Now I did go with Nomad wheels. The one thing that's kind of cool about getting wheels for the Ineos is it's the same bolt pattern as a Sprinter van. Now, if you want to think about heavy duty, like a Sprinter van has over 3,000 pounds of payload, and this has the same bolt pattern as that. So the Nomad wheels I really like. They're called Convoy. They just look great. And then I was able to wrap those about 34 by 10.5 or so BF Goodrich all-terrains. Yeah, so these tires are 285/75 R17. So it is just a little bit wider than stock tire, so it fits completely up in the wheel well when the vehicle articulates. So the Grenadiers and the Quartermasters come with a 265 wide tire, so this is only 20 millimeters wider, but because it's a 75 aspect ratio, it's nice and tall and narrow, which I really prefer, and those wheels I think just look great. Another thing that they have available from the factory is the snorkel. So you can fit a raised air intake. Some people don't call them snorkels, but I think it's still a good idea to use that term because what we're trying to do is get above the dust and above the other materials that are at a lower height on the trail. So a lot of the fine dust and everything, a lot of the heavy material that's getting kicked up stays pretty low. So the higher we get this intake, the better. The intake is also faced somewhat rearward, so it's less likely to have those materials kind of ram-aired into there. And then it absolutely would help in a brief immersion in deep water because of this whole air plenum. You just have a lot more air before it starts to suck in any water from any point in the air connection system. And that snorkel runs up through this fender and then into the airbox for that straight six turbo motor. Let's also talk about the engine a little bit. So this B58 motor is used in a bunch of different BMWs. It's also used by Toyota in the Supra. So of course there are people that will say, you don't want to run a BMW drivetrain because of reliability, but that's just not proven to be the case. This engine has been out for a very long time. And if Toyota is going to use it in their signature sports car, it's sure going to be just fine for these applications. It's also detuned in the Grenadier, so this engine normally would make over 300 horsepower in BMW applications, and it only makes about 280 horsepower in the Quartermaster. So it's detuned, which means it can run on lower quality fuel in other countries. When I drove the Grenadier across Africa, at times I had to run 85 octane, and it never threw an engine code and never gave me any trouble. All right, so here on the top of the Quartermaster, we have the Starlink Mini, and this unit fits just perfect between the two Safari windows on the top, and I've got it in a unique componentry cradle with the magnetic feet, and I just keep it plugged in and running all the time. All right, so now we're moving to the back of the vehicle, and same size tire obviously in the rear, and The suspension in the rear is the only thing that I modified on the vehicle. I went with the Ibach heavy springs, which add about 500 pounds of weight support to the rear over the stock spring. Of course, that doesn't change your payload, but that's not a problem on the Quartermaster because you can get them spec'd all the way up to 1,825 pounds of payload. All right, so one of my favorite things about this build is the Scout camper. I'm a huge personal fan of these campers. I've owned two of them. I owned a Kenai that I had on the GMC, and of course the Yoho Popup now on the Quartermaster, something that I paid for personally because this is the kind of camper that I want to use, that I want to enjoy. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Mostly comes around the minimalism, the lightweight, and the durability of the camper. So I don't like a camper with a bunch of complex systems. I don't need it to have water pumps and a bunch of plumbing that's going to leak over time, or complex electrical systems that are going to end up failing. A lot of those RV components just aren't designed to last for a lot of heavy use corrugations, time off-road like I use it. So this vehicle, even though it has a sink, the only piece of plumbing is a little pipe that comes down to a drain so you can catch your gray water. The electrical system is all contained within their power bank, so you don't have a lot of that complexity running around the camper. And it also is just like this big, open, comfortable space. You'd think it'd be pretty small with it being on the back of a mid-sized truck, but it's a 6-foot-long camper, so even in really, really bad weather, you could sleep in the dinette area with the camper top closed. Or, of course, you pop that top up, and then you've got a double bed that I sleep in an east-west configuration. The other thing I really like is that with the minimal accessories that I fitted to the camper, I got the weight in under 1,000 pounds. So it comes in the way that I've done it. When I've weighed it, comes in right at about 925 pounds. So I'm well within the gross vehicle weight of the camper. So let's talk about the inside of this Yoho Popup. You can see that really open feeling that we have. It's actually very spacious, which is surprising because this is a 5-foot bed truck with a 6-foot bed camper, and it's on a midsize. So this is one of their smallest campers that they produce, but because it doesn't have all this overhead cabinetry and it's got these big open windows, you get this really strong sense of space. So I like that. So it's comfortable to spend time working in, sitting in, being in camp, even in bad weather. Yesterday we had a lot of wind and rain and everything else that was hammering us. So this is that little retreat away from the storm. But then beyond that, one of the things that really attracts me to the Scout products is the fact that they are so simple. I don't want a lot of complexity in anything that I own because it just takes away from the experience. So the total extent of the plumbing in this camper is a drain tube that goes to the outside that you can capture in a bucket. So there's nothing to clog, there's no water pump to fail. If you want running water, you add some pressure to the Lifesaver jerry can and you're off to the races. I also like the fact that there's not a lot of drawers in here. There's no complex drawer system that again adds weight and has the opportunity to fail. I just store the equipment in these small soft bags and I stick it into the cubbies, and that keeps the weight down. And there is a surprising amount of storage. I actually have room on this camper for water. I have room on this camper. I have a Trellino composting toilet that fits underneath the dinette. And I have storage space that goes under the dinette that I can have my chairs and some camp tools and some additional accessories. And then what I'm sitting on right now is actually a 55-liter Dometic fridge. So there's all that you need in the camper, but nothing that you don't, or nothing that's going to either add unnecessary weight or expense. So let's talk a little bit about how I cook in this camper. You can outfit these with an integrated stove. I like to avoid permanently plumbed propane for safety reasons, but in this case I just use a Lindahl valve canister stove that's made by Snow Peak, and that also allows me to easily remove it outside so I can cook outside or inside. And then when I'm not using it, I've got this big work surface and I actually use it as a standing desk. The other thing that this camper has that I really love is their new power systems. My first Scout came with a Goal Zero system, which was fine, it was reliable, but it didn't have a lot of capacity, and it also required a lot of space around it, so it wasn't very space efficient. So they've now got their own proprietary electrical system that uses all Victron components, which are known for their reliability. I've used them on crossing Pacific in a sailboat. I used all those components. So I'm very familiar with them, and I'm familiar with their durability. And I also have added a lot more battery capacity because of that. And then of course, the one thing that we all want in a camper is a great place to sleep. And right over my shoulder here is a double bed. So it's easy for me and another individual to sleep in that bed comfortably. And I also avoided to have the bed extension. That's an option where you can slide out a bed platform for additional space. But even at 6'1", because I'm a side sleeper, I'm able to sleep in an east-west configuration up here on the bed. And that does save a lot of weight. So again, I'm coming back to, I want simplicity and weight savings as much as possible. So it's got these natural wood countertops, which I think look great. And this table here swings into place so I can be working if I need to. I do need to do a bunch of remote work when I'm in the camper, so being able to work is really key. This dinette configuration is so spacious that you feel like you have a lot of room in the camper. The other thing I like is that the way that this is constructed, the tent walls get under a lot of tension, so there's not a lot of flapping of the tent walls. They've done a good job of going with premium materials. They worked with Go Fast Campers on the development of the tent. So you got a lot of that engineering horsepower behind it to make a high quality product. And then for heating and cooling, I'm trying something a little bit different, and the jury's still out on if it's going to be a good long-term solution or not. But EcoFlow makes this new Wave 3 air conditioner and heater. And so it works like a heat pump, like it would in a house in Phoenix or something like that. So I've got, almost 6,000 BTUs of air conditioning, because I do live in the desert Southwest. I have almost 6,800 BTU of heat that I can produce. So it works like a heat pump, and I just run the tubing out through the window. And I've done several nights with that in cold temperatures, and it's very effective. The only downside is if you're in weather for a couple days and you don't get solar or you're not driving, then it's very difficult to charge that back up again. So I'm trying to figure out how much battery capacity do I need? How much solar capacity do I need? I have added solar to the unit by going with a Red Arc solar blanket on the front window, and then it does have a charge controller, so I can charge the batteries in the camper from that additional solar capacity more than the 200 watts that I have on the roof. So overall, there's not a lot to talk about the camper because it doesn't have a lot of complex systems. It's just very simple, easy to operate, easy to live with, nice and lightweight, and it also makes it a little bit more affordable than some of the other campers on the market. So lowering down the top or putting it up is super easy. It's strut assisted, and it's got this really clever mechanism that you can kind of hold your arms from the side and slowly bring it down, or use some leverage to push it back up. When I first initially lift the top up, I do use kind of my shoulder into the top and push a little bit with my leg, so it makes it a little bit easier on the body. But it's very easy to pop it up and take it back down. So I kind of get this loose here a little bit, like that. And then I close the door and I turn the fan on high, which sucks all of the material in, creates a vacuum, and it really helps it come down nice and slow and smooth. So let's talk about the inside of the Quartermaster. It's one of the things I like about the truck the most, is it seems a little old school, which I like. Big chunky dials and buttons. You actually have a traditional transfer case shift lever. I have a real mechanical e-brake. These things are almost impossible to find anymore in a vehicle. And I'm just really glad that it still exists in the Quartermaster. Bunch of switches up top that we can use to combine the batteries for winching or for helping to jump start the vehicle. We've got a bunch of interior and exterior switch locations that you are already pre-wired. So one of the things I'm going to be doing here soon is there's an exterior power supply on the top of the truck, and I'm going to connect it directly to the Starlink. So just with a flip of a switch, I can turn the Starlink on and off. Now let's talk about the pros and cons of the Scout Camper. So the Scout Camper has been really good. This is one of the very early production models. The only thing that I've had, I guess I have two things that have gone, I don't think, well with the camper. So the wood finish needs to be, it needs a better finish. It needs to be sanded more thoroughly. I've experienced some splinters from that. So I'm going to need to refinish the wood top. That may be something that they've since resolved in production, but make sure that. So the surface needs to be addressed a little bit. The other thing that I had happen was one of the gas struts on the front popped off of the mount, not doing anything unusual or even getting the camper top out of whack. That could also be, this is a very early production unit, that could be an issue with that, but hopefully those things have been addressed. No other issues with the camper at all. When we talk about the pros in the camper, lightweight, very durable construction. It's designed to be used, overlanding, designed to be used off-road, heavily off-road. So the camper is well suited to my needs. The other thing that I like about it is the overall compact dimensions, but the big interior space. And then the last thing I'm going to come back to, and I talk about it a lot with the Scouts, is just the minimal nature of the camper. And that results in a camper that weighs just over 900 pounds.